It all begins when gates of the demon realm burst open and unleash tons of ungodly creatures that wreak havoc on the greedy humans who've had it good for far too long. But this isn't your average story. The creatures from hell are called demons, and the special ones among the humans awaken and become hunters, thanks to a long and grueling war with the demons. The hunters somehow managed to control the invasion from the demon realm, and humanity gets a second chance. Over time, the destroyed cities are rebuilt, and humans are able to lead reasonably normal lives. But the demon problem shows no signs of decreasing, since there is only a small supply of naturally awakened hunters, while the demons seem never-ending, like donations from Pokemani simps on Twitch. That's why humanity gives birth to something that can only be described as aliens, grown in a lab called chimera hunters, because they are a fusion of humans, who are usually prisoners, with cells from the monsters, or the mysterious or found in the demon realm. In a race against time for the survival of humans, the scientists somehow managed to make it possible to mass produce the chimera hunters. That leads to a strong friendship between scientists and hunters, as the hunters no longer need to go out and constantly put their lives at risk, while the monsters step in and save lives in their place. Decades of peace go by, and the mad scientists start creating illegal labs to run their cursed human experiments inside one of those secret labs. Two scientists end their shift by observing the last camera of the day. Number 17. Farais yells at his buddy Zach not to get too close if he wants his head to stay attached. Zuck tells him that our boy no. 17 is brain dead at this point, and he's basically a vegetable until he gets direct orders, looking at the abomination lying in the dark, in his pitiful condition, from the unimaginably inhumane experiments done on him. Zach notices his right arm is mangled, probably because of an experiment that went wrong. Feeling some real pity for the creature, he decides to report on No. 17 because there's no doubt he'll be put down sooner or later anyway. Inside the director's office, the men report that number 17's body is beyond repair, and they're actually shocked he can still breathe, because any other chimera would be long dead in that kind of condition. The director asks them how long they think it will survive, and the chunky nerd estimates he has around a month or so. Hearing that, the stone-hearted man coldly orders them to send it to the front lines, to serve as a meat shield for the hunters heading out of the gate. In the gate blockade operation, he explicitly tells them not to put a return command in the order. Later in the demon realm, a pterodactyl-looking bird dives on our boy, but before it even gets into his stratosphere, he slices the birdie up like it's paper. His next challenger is a Victriple ripoff that emerges from the ground, but our boy kicks it up into the air and starts going ham on the plant monster before opening his nightmare fuel mouth to charge his lightning breath and annihilate anything and everything standing for miles in front of him, analyzing his battle power. The hunters are completely flabbergasted at the chimera, who is easily an S rank or even higher. One of the guys turns to look at the portal, which still isn't showing any signs of closing, but his team members assure him they don't have to worry about any monsters leaking through, as long as they have the S-rank chimera doing their job, while they just deal with the trash that gets past him. Right after they get rid of the last trash mobs remaining, the gate suddenly begins collapsing on itself. So the hunters bolt as fast as they can. As they retreat, the lady asks why they are leaving the chimera behind, and the man replies that they were directly ordered to abandon him. Watching the giant crab monster torture our boy, the lady feels some sympathy for the poor chimera, who single-handedly prevented a major disaster from happening. But the man feels absolutely nothing, and says that chimeras are pretty much brainless servants, made in labs born to take orders and nothing else. Even though our boy loses his body parts like they're on sale, hunters think of him as just another monster. After the hunters are gone, he keeps fighting the monsters like his life truly depends on it. All the while, the orders repeat in his head that he cannot return, even after the mission is complete. Standing in a pool of acid, the last two brain cells still firing in his skull, scream that he should return. But his code doesn't allow him to retreat, In the operation, nearly 2,000 demons were slain. Yet not a single hunter died, thanks to his massive contribution. And in his dying moments, when nothing more than a head remains, his life flashes before his fading eyes. He finally remembers that he was actually a human boy, who got kidnapped at the age of just 9 years old. Starting from that point, he sees his life unfold before him like a film from a dusty cassette. Even though the brain rot has disabled him so badly, he can't even understand what he's seeing. With the movie of life playing in his mind, he silently watches the scenes unfold before him. With the earliest one being of the time, he was born in an orphanage. 9 years pass, and he grows up to become a naughty boy who throws stones at kids who call him ugly, like every messed up 9-year-old does. But that makes the orphanage director so disappointed. A senile man says he's tired of his non-stop BS and boots him out of the orphanage, not giving a flying duck if the kid dies in the freezing cold. A team of scientists finds him passed out on the ground, and one of the scientists is mildly disturbed at the fact that the slums are the only place where he can find abandoned children on the streets like Easter eggs. He does what any true mad scientist does and takes our boy back to the lab to run some twisted, illegal experiments on him. During his first experiment, they cast a spell on him to prevent him from ever running away again and name him number 17. Finally awake, the first thing our boy sees when he wakes up are madmen recording him while they inject S-rank silkworms into his bloodstream. He tries to move, but they have him tied down like he's some wild animal with no rights. Days go by, and the doctors can't believe he isn't showing a single side effect. His mind and thinking are completely intact, and he has full control over all the monster's abilities, even though he looks like he's 1 second from taking a Glock and a bag of ammo to the nearest school. All those sick bastards can think of is how awesome and valuable he is. They continue to inject him with all kinds of monster cells. And 6 years later, he's a full-fledged chimera hunter, capable of destroying demons with a single devastating attack. With one blast, he fires off a laser beam that fries the wasp monsters and wipes out miles of asphalt along the road. A mother shows him her gratitude for saving her and her daughter, while the injured hunter apologizes for relying on a young boy. Like him, but our boy says he's fine, feeling completely numb inside. A few years later, his hypnosis suddenly stops, and he wonders what the hell he was doing all this time, tipping the scientist off that the side effects are finally surfacing. Time flies by, and after injecting him with cells from over 500 monsters, he no longer looks like something that could even be called human, and around 20 long years later, he becomes a giant dragon-like dog with no conscience. That looks so grotesque that normal people need to bleach their eyes after they look at him. After that, his coke trip finally comes to a screeching end, and nothing of him remains except a single bone. However, that one bone suddenly floats into the air and begins regenerating his entire body, until Chimera number 17 responds. Except this time, he's a handsome young man with rock-solid ABS, still in shock from his insane revival. He wonders to himself if he really is a human once again. He figures that since those monster cells are still inside him, probably doesn't count as fully human, especially with how easily he flexes those sharp talons, like he's about to launch a fashion line for apex predators. No one's shown up from the lab to drag him back, so our boy assumes he's been ditched like a stingy ex. Then he notices the lab number that used to be on his arm is now gone, and that makes him wonder if he's finally managed to cut ties with the lab for good, since he's rocking a body hotter than hell itself. He guesses this might be the trait of an immortal type monster, the kind that can revive up to 3 times, unless their core gets wrecked. But one thing still nags at him that the scientists used to swear up and down, that human and immortal monster cells couldn't fuse. And here he is in full alpha mode, radiating peak form. That makes Johnny Bravo look like background filler. Maybe whatever side effects he had were erased, since he recalls how his head always used to feel foggy and chained by some kind of mental spell. But now he feels free as he ever can be. So he figures maybe it's time to live like an actual human again, now that his days of being the obedient mutt known as number 17 are over. The name was just something slapped onto him at random anyway, and he tries to remember his real one, but suddenly gets pulled into a flashback where that one old scientist referred to him as a lunatic with a rough personality. but still told him to help people from now on. The old guy asked him to dedicate his life to saving 1,000 people. But back then, our boy drowning in his edgy emo era didn't even bother to reply, snapping back to the present. He calls that advice pure trash and laughs off the ridiculous idea that some orphan, born in the slums, is supposed to help others. As he gazes at the sunset sky, ABS shimmering like they've got their own lighting budget, he thinks about revenge for a moment. But lets the thought slide. After all, revenge needs a visible target, and it's been so long that his grudge feels more like a fading itch than anything real. And besides, there's no path back to the human world right now anyway. He figures he'll run into them someday, and decides to shelf the whole revenge thing for now and focus on what's ahead. Staring down at his majestic body, a divine glow conveniently covering his more delicate parts, he comes to a decision that he'll try to live like a proper human being from now on, to make up for all the time that got stolen from him. As he strolls off, he realizes he should probably find something to wear, and heads out on a mission for clothes. But then a weird thought pops up mid-walk, that he can't even remember the last time he wore anything. He fires up his brain cells to figure out what material might work, but comes up blank, so he does what any lost barbarian would do, and starts scanning the area. And soon enough, something catches his eye. Up ahead, he sees a bird-like monster's corpse, and guesses that maybe it died in a turf war, though there aren't any wounds to show for it. That leads him to think it must have been poison, which honestly works out great for him, since it's in mint condition and is perfect for skinning. He morphs his arm into a giant blade, like he's just reaching for a butter knife, and recalls from the lab that it's better to start cutting from the belly, and then move to the limbs. Cheyenne gets to work, but the moment he slices it open, some purple gas leaks out. He instantly clocks it as poison, but doesn't seem the least bit rattled and inhales it like perfume. The only thing that annoys him is the smell, since now he's going to have to wash the hide. After a while, he finishes skinning the overgrown turkey and figures it wasn't a half-bad job for a first try. He then heads to the river to wash the hide, but when he pulls it out, he seems a bit disappointed as he notices it's gone stiff, even though it felt soft before. So he concludes that it might just be the monster at play here. Then, out of nowhere, a genius idea hits him like divine inspiration as he lays the hide flat and starts beating it up like it owes him money. Mid-punch, he wonders if this is how people normally tan hides, and hopes it'll work rather than destroy all his hard work. After some good old medieval therapy, the hide turns soft again, and he holds it up proudly, ducking behind the naked bird corpse for modesty. He begins making adjustments to the hide. But just then a flame flickers to life on the monster's head. The bird's eyes snap open, clearly disturbed at the sight of someone ripping off its skin. Like wrapping paper, Kian quickly punches some holes into the hide, slips into his makeshift gear, and ties a vine around his waist like it's runway ready. With that, he's suited up in his new look, and honestly feels pretty good about the result. He spots some leftover poison on the inside part, but decides to let it be because it is too much hassle to clean. At that exact moment, the burr monster lets out an ear-piercing screech, which shocks Chion, who genuinely thought it was dead. It thrashes around and even seems like it understands human speech, which throws Chion off. He figures the monster must also be an immortal type, since it wasn't breathing earlier. If this had happened before, he would have roasted it without a second thought. But now seeing it weak and vulnerable, he figures that there's no need. Chion just smiles and says the bird got lucky, wishing it a second chance at life before turning to leave. As he walks off, he casually adds that if fate's feeling extra spicy, maybe they'll meet again a while later. He wanders into a cave, glancing around like he's house shopping. Without warning, a massive centipede jumps out and lands right in front of him. But Chion doesn't even blink. The creature lashes out, but he's more concerned about whether the lighting here is good enough for a home. With one clean strike, he slices off the centipede's head like he's swatting a fly, and turns away, mentally crossing this cave off the list. Next, he finds himself in a snowy mountain region, where a yeti lies on the ground, frozen in fear, probably having seen Chion coming, like a jump scare apparently. Our boy ran fades with the yetis, but rejected this location too, because food would be a nightmare to find. and he checks out a forest. But the mushrooms reek so badly. It's like someone microwaved fish in an office break room. So that one's a no-go as well. He keeps exploring, from a creepy lizard cave to a suspiciously cozy volcano. But nothing clicks finally. He arrives at the edge of a cliff and gazes out at a breathtaking view. And it stuns him that a place in the demon realm could look this beautiful. He decides to scout the area and casually jumps off the cliff, landing with a thud that'd break someone else's spine. Rion notices the water is crystal clear, and there's a solid fish population too. Some monster fish leap out trying to get a nibble, and he wonders if he could roast one up like a camping trip meal. Thinking deeper, he figures this is the perfect spot because it has a natural fish farm, clean air, flowers everywhere. So he makes his choice that he'll build his house here, and decides to call it the Cheondu Woon House. Meanwhile, in a distant part of the demon realm, the air sparks as a portal rips open and something shoots out, slamming into the ground with a thunderous crash. A robotic figure rises from the smoke, looks around, and wonders out loud if this really is the demon realm. He takes a moment to soak in the beauty of the place, really letting the fresh air and colorful flowers work their charm, and ends up deciding that this spot is pretty much perfect for building Cheondu Won's house. Starting off, he clears out the area with these vine-like extensions that sprout from his fingertips, slicing down every tree in sight with a single clean motion. And once the clearing is done, he uses those same vines to gather the fallen logs, to stack them up as his primary building material. Right when things seem to be going smoothly, he notices that the ground looks a little too bumpy for his liking. So he pulls out the vines again and smooths everything out, taking care to remove any leftover tree stumps until the clearing finally looks clean enough to host a Pinterest-worthy cabin. As he sets the logs in place and plants the main pillars for the structure, he starts to notice how his body moves almost on instinct, and it gets him wondering if this is what people mean when they talk about free will, especially since it's the first time he's building something that actually belongs to him. He lays out the floor planks next and decides to try snail-type monster mucus in place of nails, since that stuff hardens into something close to rock, and he figures it might even work as waterproofing, which honestly sounds like a win. When the main structure is finished, he gives it a personal touch by layering some silkworm cocoon threads over the roof, and that boosts his confidence that monsters probably won't come knocking anytime soon. It looks pretty cozy now and almost feels complete, but he pauses to think about what else a proper human house should have, then recalls how back at the lab they used to show videos of normal houses before the gates ever opened. Thinking it through, he realizes most people either had pets or grew something in their yards. And since dogs are not exactly a thing in the demon world, he figures the best option is to grow plants and make a garden. After spending some time brainstorming on what to grow, he suddenly hits a eureka moment and decides Mandragora would be perfect, especially with a snowy mountain nearby that fits their habitat. As he hikes through the cold, snow-covered terrain, he remembers that Mandragoras usually grow in mana-rich peaks, and the way the snow piles around him makes him think back to when he got kidnapped and sent to the lab. Ironically enough, he kind of sees that moment as a blessing now, because after becoming a chimera, he no longer had to worry about freezing to death or starving in miserable conditions. Eventually, he senses the high mana around him and figures he must be close. And sure enough, he finally spots the Mandragora roots. They look like sunfish with leafy heads and are known for being super sensitive to stress, often dying from even the tiniest change in their surroundings. He reasons that picking younger ones would be smarter, since they might adapt better during the move. So he carefully selects 3. Bracing himself for the screaming he knows they're famous for, but instead of the shrill cries he expects, he finds a first little guy sound asleep, snoring like a baby, and the other 2 he picks later are also peacefully snoozing, and even sleep-talking that throws him off, until he remembers that the whole Mandragora screaming thing was more of a lab-created nightmare caused by humans, growing them in low mana environments filled with stress. And the screaming was mostly a reaction to being ripped out forcibly. He starts to wonder if the silence is just because they're in the demon realm now, But even so, it's weird that they're not trying to resist or run away. That is, unless they somehow recognize him as one of their own, which wouldn't be too surprising, considering he's got mandragora cells mixed into his body too. He gently tucks them into his waistband, feeling relieved that they're calm and unstressed, and begins to wonder if he could politely ask them later for a few root tendrils to brew tea, or maybe even use their fruit as a snack, though he quickly remembers that the fruit turns poisonous if picked forcibly, so he makes a mental note to wait and request it nicely when the timing feels right. Right around then, he picks up on the presence of some hunters nearby and starts to question why anyone would bother climbing a perilous, snowy mountain unless absolutely necessary, but decides to check them out anyway, since he could use some gate stones from them. Meanwhile, one of the hunters is grumbling that they've been left to face danger on their own because their so-called teammates ditched them as bait, while the other one shouts for him to focus, because a wave of monster rabbits is barreling toward them fast. The monstrous rabbits leap at them with their grotesque, wide-open mouths filled with writhing tentacles and fangs, but the guy manages to summon a force field, just in time to keep them from becoming dinner, though he quickly realizes the barrier won't hold for long, and starts wishing he had just taken on odd jobs instead, regretting every decision that led to this moment. He starts screaming for someone to help, just as his shield shatters into nothing. Our boy swoops in with the kind of entrance that gives off serious Superman landing energy, and both hunters freeze, stunned to see an actual person casually appear out of nowhere. The sheer pressure from his presence alone sends the snow rabbits into a panic, and without hesitation, they scatter like scared little rodents, leaving the two hunters standing there, absolutely bewildered over how B-class monsters just ran for their lives. From a half-naked man, they rush to thank him, introducing themselves as Song-ju and Kim Tae-hoon, and ask for his name, which he shares. But neither of them has ever heard a name quite like that before. Kim Tae-hyun begins to wonder out loud if he might be some kind of reclusive hunter, judging by his rugged caveman aesthetic, while our guy flips the question and asks what they're doing, wandering around in a death trap like this, since they don't exactly seem higher than D-class. The two explain that they're on a mission to capture a chimera alive, in exchange for a rather generous bounty, which instantly grabs our boy's attention. One of them clarifies that the chimera they're after escaped from a lab and leapt into a gate mid-chase, which actually comes as a huge relief to him, since it confirms they're not tracking him down. He then asks where their gear is, wondering how they ended up roaming the wild completely empty-handed, and whether they at least have a gate stone on them, to which the guy explains that their so-called teammates bailed with all their equipment, and that the betrayal had been part of their plan from the start, something he now regrets not picking up on sooner. Hearing all of this, our boy silently locks eyes on their gate stones, and, as the hunters try to explain how they're suffering from mana contamination and won't be able to survive much longer, they desperately ask if he has a way out, since humans can only survive a limited time in the demon world before needing to return and purify themselves, or they'll die from overexposure. One of them even pleads with him to help, mentioning that he has a pregnant wife waiting back home. But before they can even finish the sentence, our guy suddenly freezes as if sensing a shift in the cosmos, then takes off midair like the Hulk, leaving them hanging mid-monologue with the wind in their faces. Elsewhere, the robot-like chimera finds itself standing at the edge of a cliff, and the same hunters who ditched earlier try to ambush it from behind, but the creature slowly turns to face them, making it very clear that it now intends to erase them from existence. As our boy pulls up to the scene, his eyes go a little wide, wondering if he showed up too late. Up ahead, blood and gear are scattered across the ground, while a flickering blue energy ball slowly fades at the edge of the cliff, which makes him think the hunters must have ditched and run. They even left all their loot behind. And judging by the mix of child and animal footprints, it looks like the test subject might have changed forms mid-fight. He recalls what the monster hunter said earlier about it being a lab experiment that jumped into the gate during its escape. It is made from liquid metal, so it can freely shift forms. But due to how rare the material is, they built it small and compact like a child, Cheyenne looks down the cliff and can barely hold in a laugh, realizing this mechanical little gremlin somehow managed to wreck 5B rank hunters. Meanwhile, back with our battered hunter duo, Kim desperately shakes Song-ju, telling him not to give up. But the poor guy coughs out that his whole body's contaminated now, and he's done for, but Kim doesn't accept that and brings up his family. Song-ju uses what little strength he has left to ask Kim to apologize to them for him. But Kim yells at him to hang on and insists that miracles do exist. Right then, someone steps into view, making Kim immediately tense up. But it turns out to be Chaon, casually strolling back with all their luggage. The moment the monster hunter sees him, he runs over, drops to his knees, and basically starts praying to Daddy Cheon to save them both. Our hero is confused at first, but then remembers that he told them he didn't have a gate stone. That's when Kim suddenly pulls something from his pocket, 2 10 million yen checks, and begs him to please hand them a gate stone. He keeps rambling that if they don't get out now, they're definitely going to die. Meanwhile, Cheon stares at the money and tries to imagine the total amount. In his head, he knows there's no way to use it in this world, but once he hits the human world, it'll come in real handy. So with all the generosity his chaotic heart can muster, he pulls out a gate stone. Kim drops into a flawless 90-degree bow and starts thanking him over and over, swearing he'll never forget this kindness. The monster hunter runs back to his partner, yelling that they're getting out of here as fast as possible, while Cheon just eyes the 2 checks, wondering where to stash them. As the two make their way toward the gate, Cheon asks what the current gate stone price is, and gets told it's hit 1 million yen. Never the humble guy he is, he says he feels like he got paid way too much, and puts a hand on Song-ju's shoulder, and casually says he'll give him some change instead. Kim looks confused until he realizes what Cheon is doing, that he is injecting mana directly into his partner. He instantly yells at him to stop, as transferring mana to someone else is dangerous, and if it reacts badly, both people could drop dead on the spot. Kim panics, thinking this is how it ends. But then Song-ju suddenly jolts upright, like someone just pressed reset. As the demonic energy inside him gets completely purified, he grabs Kim in a tearful hug, while the poor guy just stands there stunned, trying to process what just happened. Cheon turns around to leave, as Song-ju shouts that he'll never forget this favor, while Kim is still frozen in shock. As he tries to figure out who Cheon even is, our boy heads back home and pauses outside for a second, then breathes out in relief. After sensing no intruders, the mandragora plants start waking up. Their leaves look droopy and sad, which instantly raises red flags. So he gets to work planting them right away. Once they're all in the soil, he wonders if they're going to be okay, but they still look pretty miserable. Cheon stares at their depressed expressions and thinks it might be for being ripped out of their original habitat, or maybe they're just starving. Deciding to test the second theory, he injects a little of his mana into the soil. The monster plants instantly perk up like they just drank an espresso, and our boy can't help but smile at the result. While he's chatting with his leafy new roommates, he senses a presence behind him. He figures it's probably the mechanical creature those hunters were chasing, though he finds it weird that it followed him all the way here. Choosing to ignore it for now, he stashes the cash and starts sorting through the loot bags. Turns out he scored big, as he now has spare clothes, sleeping bags, cooking gear, and just then his eyes light up when he finds a packet of ramen. The last time he ate that stuff was back at the orphanage, and the nostalgia hits hard. Feeling hungry and hyped, he decides to cook it up right away, following the recipe as best he can. He heads to the lake for water, but quickly realizes he's got no clue how to measure the right amount. Before he can think too hard, the sharp-toothed lake fish suddenly leap out, like they're trying to get a bite. Remembering how people usually toss random stuff into ramen for flavor, he readies his fingers and flicks the soul out of one of the poor fish. Next up, he scavenges around for ingredients like eggs and maybe green onions. He comes across some weird capsule-shaped eggs and grabs a few. And since there's no actual green onion around, he settles for fresh tree leaves, figuring they're close enough. He then tosses everything into a pot and decides that's good enough for prep. That's when the little robot steps out, holding its stomach like it's starving as it eyes the cooking pot. Meanwhile, Chion lights the fire and notes that the instructions don't say when to add the fish. So he just throws everything in to boil together as the smell starts rising from the pot. The monster plants instantly start gagging in disgust, while Chion quietly wonders if ramen always smelled like this. The smell wafts over to the mechanical creature, who starts swaying from the pure scent of food. It floats a little closer while thinking it wants to eat too, then suddenly transforms into a puppy. It remembers from the lab that humans love dogs, so he decides to take advantage of that, and starts limping toward Chion, fake whimpering to squeeze out some sympathy. But Chion watches all this with a deadpan face, not even slightly surprised. He figures the thing's just trying to lower his guard, and that the injury is clearly staged. Looking at its overly cute puppy act, he thinks it's still young and clueless, and wonders how something like that managed to escape from the lab to the demon realm on its own. Playing along, he asks if it wants a taste of the ramen, which makes the creature drool instantly. But right in front of them is a death brew of random nonsense that could take out a grown man, but still they both decide to risk it. The moment they take a bite, the dog pauses as it tries to process the flavor, but Chion, on the other hand, it's flashbanged into a memory of hot pot back at the orphanage, and smiles while claiming it tastes just like it did back then. Our hero declares it to be delicious, since the memory is strong, enough to override the horror of the actual flavor. Meanwhile, the poor mandragoras are seconds away from ascension to their next life from the toxic smell. After they finish the meal, Chion tells the dog it's time to clean up and that it can leave now. As the mechanical pup limps away, Chion casually points out that it was limping on the other leg earlier. The robot then hurriedly switches back to limping on the original foot, while Chion barely holds in his laugh. After finishing the dishes, he moves on to the laundry, beating the pollen-covered clothes with a stick, like people used to do in the old days. Though not particularly fond of pollen, he figures he can't keep living in nothing but a leather outfit, like some caveman. He tries to strike the fabric gently to avoid tearing it, but one swing ends up shattering the rock beneath and obliterating the garment along with it. After a brief moment of awkward silence, he sighs and picks up the last piece of clothing. That's when he notices the robot creature still lingering nearby, observing him from a distance. Earlier, it had disguised itself as a rock, before that as a fish while he was washing dishes, and before that as a tree while he tended to the flowers. He realizes that the creature has been following him all along, silently shifting shapes without ever approaching directly. This continues until a bee lands on its nose, causing it to freak out and yell that it hates bees. Judging by the behavior, he estimates the creature's age to be under 5. Its speech is mechanical and awkward, a trait often seen in young cameras, with artificially implanted memories. Choosing to ignore it, he clears his throat to make the creature aware of his presence, and casually comments on how lovely the forsythia flowers are. Meanwhile, he finishes the laundry and mutters that the task was harder than he expected. Unfortunately, he realizes the clothes are too small for him, which feels like a waste after all the effort he put in. He hangs the laundry on a silk thread, then decides to check on the mandragoras. The creature, seizing the moment, grabs the shirt he just washed and wears it. Eager to look like him after declaring the shirt its own, it transforms into a small human girl. Meanwhile, he finds the mandragora children struggling against the soil. Their leaves are wilting and their roots look dried out, which is odd since he already cleared all the weeds. Curious, he digs around and discovers that the soil is still filled with worms and debris, making it difficult for the plants to grow properly. He realizes he should have tilled the soil from the start, and this oversight might have endangered the mandragora kids, wanting to make things right. He starts preparing a garden about the size of his house. Just then, the mechanical girl steps in front of him and greets him. He's a bit surprised to hear her speak. At last, she asks whether the house belongs to him, and he replies that it does. Immediately, she concludes that he must be a native of the demon realm, deciding to mess with her a little. He plays along and asks which tribe she's from. The question confuses her, but she tries to bluff her way through, claiming she comes from a very distant place across the waterfall, one that he wouldn't be able to find. He jokes asking if that means she's from the coconut tribe, and without missing a beat, she nods proudly like it's the most obvious thing in the world. When he questions her about the shirt, she casually explains that in her tribe, whoever finds something owns it. It's just their way. He's entertained by her logic. Lets her keep it and asks what she's doing all the way out here. She responds that she was kicked out of her tribe, and shyly asks if she can stay here with him, explaining that there are no bugs and there's an actual house. So overall it just seems safe. This while nervously twiddling her thumbs, like she's rehearsing a puppy eye audition. Realizing she's just looking for a peaceful place to rest, he agrees, but only if she pulls her weight and helps out with the chores. Her eyes light up instantly, and she asks what he wants her to do, fully ready to dive into whatever mission he throws her way. He tells her they need to prepare a vegetable patch, so the mandragoras can have a proper home. Without hesitation, she grabs the stick, strikes a confident pose, and says she's strong enough for the job. Then she proceeds to absolutely obliterate the soil, like it's made of sponge cake. Watching her effortlessly rip through the ground, he thinks to himself that she's either seriously bad at pretending to be normal, or just has no idea how average kids function. He finally introduces himself and asks for her name. She pauses, clearly caught off guard since she doesn't have a name. And after drawing inspiration from the flowers she saw earlier, she declares that her name is Kim Nari. He can tell that she just copied it from Forsythia, but she's committed now and repeats it with a straight face. Soon the patch is ready, and Cheyenne even manages to set up a neat little stone fence around it. Seeing the mandragora roots looking so cheerful makes him wish he'd done all this sooner. But then Kim suddenly gets all quiet. He notices the shift and asks why she's crying. She wipes her eyes and says the mandragoras remind her of her friends, which makes him pause and wonder if something like friendship could even exist in the lab before he can ask more. A shrill, high-pitched screech cuts through the forest. He explains to her that it's just monsters hunting each other. Background music really. In this kind of place, but Kim curls up in worry and tells him that she saw a little chick earlier, before she found his place. And now she's afraid it might be in trouble. Chion nods, and she adds that it looked like it had already been bitten. He tells her bluntly that it's probably going to get eaten soon. Watching her tremble, he figures she wants to save it, but can't bring herself to do it. She mutters that she can't save monsters. And it hits him that the brainwashing probably still has her locked up, mentally preventing her from making her own choices. So instead of telling her what to do, he offers a suggestion phrased carefully, that the chick might survive if she goes back for it. And that's all it took to get her up and sprinting. Meanwhile, in the woods, wasp-like abominations with 2 terrifying rows of sideways teeth are already attacking the injured chick, just as one of them moves in to finish the job. Kim bursts in like a caffeinated tornado, kicks one of their heads clean off, saying that she'll save the chick no matter what. During the fight, she flashes back to her time in the lab. The other Chimera kids resented her for constantly winning first place in ranked combat trials. That meant the other kids became eligible for the scariest experiments, with the highest failure rates. They snatched away her plush toy, shoved her to the ground, and told her she should let them win for once. They even said it would have been better if she didn't exist, while they kicked her non-stop. She never understood it, because she was just doing what she was told, now staring down the monsters. She screams at them to stop. She yells that it's wrong for a group to gang up on someone weaker, then swings her fist, and sends the last wasp flying into another dimension. Back at the house, Chion is casually feeding mana to the mandragora roots, probably feeling like a low-key plant dad. When Kim shows up again, she's running toward him, cradling the chick in her arms and yelling for help, panicked that it won't wake up. He tells her to slow down and take a breath as he takes a closer look. Something about the little fluff ball starts to feel strangely familiar. Him keeps crying, panicking over whether the poor ball of fluff is about to die, while Chion stays calm and offers to take a closer look. He reaches out and pours a bit of mana into the little fluff ball, and relaxes as he realizes the wound doesn't look fatal. Every monster's magic carries its own specific history, and even though this one shrank down and changed color, Chion instantly knows it's the same creature he skinned back then. He strikes a Sherlock pose, trying to figure out why it shrank so much, while Kim keeps asking if it's going to die. But Cheon reassures her that the thing's just malnourished and only shriveled up from starvation. He says he's already given it some mana, so if they just let it be, it should recover on its own. However, Kim suddenly spirals into a trauma flashback as her mind drags her back to that lab, to her ripped-up doll. With a shaky voice, she says they can't just leave it alone, as it keeps flopping over like a sad pancake. She hugs it tight while pulling out the puppy eyes and asks if she can keep it, promising to take care of it properly. Cheon smiles and warns her it might grow too big to handle, but she fires back that she'll just feed it a tiny bit. He folds under the pressure of her cute attack, and her eyes light up like it's the 4th of July, and he jokes that it could work as their guard dog, or rather a guard bird right then. The fluff ball opens its eyes and looks around in complete confusion, eventually locking onto Cheon as it recognizes him and lets out a low, menacing coo. Kim jumps at the sound, lifting it up with a squeal, saying it's finally talking, while the bird just looks around, wondering what kind of hell it woke up in. She hugs it again as it flails helplessly, while Cheon stands there awkwardly, not sure how to process this madness. The fluff ball yells out again and demands to be let go, which catches Cheon off guard that he can actually understand it. A few moments later, Kim wraps it up like a mummy and proudly announces that treatment is complete, then says she already picked a name for it. While the bird continues to squirm, she explains that since it acts like a pigeon, she's going to name it COO, which Cheon finds sort of hilarious. The angry bird immediately starts going off at Kim for coming up with such a ridiculous name, but she obviously can't understand it. So she dumps a whole bucket of water on its head, saying it must be thirsty. Then she pauses in confusion and asks Cheon why the bird's now bloated like a water balloon. He tells her that's probably enough hydration for now, so she dashes off to grab food instead. Meanwhile, Cheon figures he should finally get a proper storage cabinet running, since all their stuff's piling up. But when he tries to cut the wood, it just splits like cheap cardboard. He's confused, since he made the table and chair just fine with the same method. The fluff ball is clearly done with his nonsense, and points out that it's softwood, so of course it doesn't work. Cheon realizes wood types matter, and asks which color wood's the strongest. The bird instantly answers redwood, but then it freezes mid-sentence. As reality crashes down that it just got understood, it stares at Cheon in horror, wondering if he's been able to hear it this whole time. Locking eyes, it wobbles to its feet, and then activates its mind skill to try to read Cheon's mind. But nothing happens as telepathy fails. However, Cheon just looks around innocently and says he doesn't see any red trees nearby. He wonders if they grow in another region, while the bird panics, realizing its mental powers just got blocked. Eventually, it drops the act and flat out asks Cheon if he can hear it. Cheon explains it's not really hearing, but the words just kind of show up in his brain. But then he flips it by asking how a monster can even understand human language like that. He figures the bird must be one of those super rare, intelligent monsters that somehow get born against all odds. But it's his first time seeing one up close. Cheon then asks point blank if it's the same bird from before, which the fluff confirms, saying it came back because it wanted to see him again, since Cheon saved its life. It wanted to repay the favor if they ever met again, not wasting any time. Cheon tells it to help him right now. That catches the bird off guard, but its size takes a breath and agrees to guide him to the red trees. Meanwhile, not far away, Kim's running like her life depends on it, while dodging fireballs raining down behind her, yelling at whoever's attacking to back off. Tears stream down her face as she cries out that it's too hot, and suddenly a blast sends her crashing face first into the dirt. Her mind almost shuts down as she starts to panic, thinking the lab's found her and she's done for. Just then someone steps out of the fire, who has long hair, flowing dramatically like some third-rate anime extra. Looking at his tracker, he confirms she's the mechanical creature they were after, charging up another attack. He mumbles that his life's on the line too, and throws another fireball at Kim, who can only stare at it in defeat. But before it hits, our hero pulls the classic Chad move, stepping in front of her and effortlessly diffusing the attack, like he's swatting a fly. Q immediately tells him the 3 directions can wait, as the girl's top priority. Right now, Cheyenne notices that Kim's terrified of fire, and doesn't look mentally stable at all. He decides to put out the flames first, and the fluff ball agrees, adding that only a complete trash bag would go after child. Rapunzel over there glares and roasts Cheyenne and calls him a caveman, then threatens to beat him down if he doesn't back off. Rion fires back that this Rapunzel cosplayer talks way too much, which instantly sets him off. The guy screams that Rion's ruining his dramatic moment and hurls a massive fireball at him. Rion just raises a finger and pulls a freezer move, blasting the attack away like it's a birthday candle. The explosion behind Rapunzel is massive, and he just stands there stunned, while trying to process what just happened. Debris starts falling, but it's already too late as he gets buried under a pile of rubble. A few moments later, Rion walks up to Kim and asks if she's okay, who then wipes her eyes and thanks him for putting all the flames out. He then gives her a solid piece of advice, that the next time she's scared, she should punch the fear itself. As he walks toward Rapunzel, he grabs him by the hair and continues. The pep talk suddenly stops mid-sentence. He stares at the wig in his hand in silence, and realizes that the guy underneath is suffering from full-blown shiny egghead syndrome.